My heart is pounding like a war drum as I step through those massive oak doors. The courtroom hush wraps around me, thick as fog. Does silence ever feel this loud? The moment my foot touches the polished marble floor, I know I am somewhere beyond ordinary. This is not just any trial. This is the trial of Dominic Sinclair, once a household name. Now the center of a storm that has captured the world's gaze. Rows of church pew benches stand on either side, carved from dense walnut that looks as unforgiving as cold steel. I rub my palm against the wood and feel its chill. Have you ever sat on something so solid that every shift of your weight echoes through your bones? That is how I feel after only a few seconds. Above me, 10 crystal chandeliers hang in perfect symmetry, their prisms scattering dim rainbows across the high, arched ceiling. They look magnificent and out of place, like flowers blooming in a battlefield. I trace a path down the central aisle, my notebook clutched close. To my right, Marcus Bennett, my colleague and second pair of eyes, leans in, whispering. They say each one of those chandeliers weighs as much as 50 pounds. He glances upward, his jaw slightly slack. Imagine the rigors those crystals have seen. I nod silently. Every detail here is charged with unspoken tension. The hush is not peaceful, it is expectant. It is as though the room itself is holding its breath. The air carries a faint scent of old leather and polished wood, undercut by the sterile hint of institutional cleaning agents. Perfume collides with that sterility as more arrivals file in reporters, photographers, legal aides in sharp suits. At the front of the room, 2 retired officers stand sentinel beside a low wooden barrier. Their uniforms are replaced by tailored suits, but their posture remains rigid, professional. Each wears a bulletproof vest beneath his jacket, an ominous reminder that safety is never guaranteed, even behind these walls. And then I see him. Dominic Sinclair leans against the railing behind that barrier. His white hair is cropped short, a dark, tailored suit drapes his broad shoulders. He stands perfectly still, one hand lightly touching a pair of reading glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. He does not look around, does not fidget. He simply watches the room, calm as a still lake, and I feel as though every eye is drawn to him like a magnet. How does it feel to be the center of that many gazes? What crosses your mind when cameras click, when dozens of journalists scribble notes, when dozens more whisper theories he gives nothing away? His face is composed, betraying no hint of guilt or fear, only a quiet confidence that sends a shiver down my spine. Marcus taps my shoulder. He's scanning the sketch artists now. He murmurs. 2 court illustrators kneel on small stands, diagonally across from Dominic. One wears magnifying lenses that make her head look comically larger. She scribbles charcoal strokes across a sketch pad, translating his features into lines and shading. Dominic tilts his head slightly, as if aware of her every movement, and I sense a silent battle of wills. Each stroke of her pencil against paper is a challenge. Each millisecond of his gaze is a refusal to be reduced to ink and charcoal. I swallow hard and focus on my own notes. Sketch artist position diagonal to defendant. I write. Subject maintains eye contact with calm intensity. My pen feels small and inadequate in my hand. Behind Dominic's table, Helena von Roth observes with equal intensity. As a jury consultant, her job is to decode every nuance of body language, to predict which potential juror will favor or reject him. Helena's eyes flick between the barrier, the bench, and the small group of seating reserved for the press. She takes detailed notes in a compact leather journal, her fingers dancing across the page. She offers a slight nod to herself, as though she has found confirmation of a hypothesis. I wonder what she sees in him. Charisma, a facade of control, a flicker of overconfidence. I jot down another line. Helena von Roth notes defendant's posture as poised predator. My mind drifts for a moment. Predator? What must it feel like to wear that label in every headline, every whispered rumor, every anxious syllable my gaze darts to the public gallery? A few friends and family members of Dominic sit scattered in the pews to the left. They are quiet, solemn, faces half hidden by shadows. They will return on Monday for opening statements, but today they watch the jury selection process. Each of them seems resigned, as though they know the battle has already begun. I straighten and move to my assigned seat in the press section, to the right side where cameras line up like soldiers on parade. I adjust my recorder's microphone to face Dominic directly. There will be no direct quotes. Today, jury selection is a silent drama of yes and no, advance and retreat. But every nuance matters. A rustle of robes heralds the judge's entrance. All heads turn as the Honorable Judge Subramaniam strides down the center aisle, flanked by bailiffs. He is tall, his robes falling in crisp folds. His eyes are sharp behind rectangular glasses, and his presence demands an immediate hush. Each step he takes is measured and deliberate, echoing across the room like a heartbeat. "All rise," the court clerk intones. I rise too, clutching my notebook, feeling every pulse in my veins. Cameras shift, tripods wobble, and Dominic Sinclair stands as well, inclining his head slightly to acknowledge the court. His posture remains unwavering, a study in control. The judge settles behind the bench. With ceremonial gravity, he knocks his gavel once. The single rap resounds like a crack of thunder. And with that, the hush becomes absolute. I lower my recorder and press the record button. The room seems to exhale as voices murmur the first procedural announcements. But I hear only the whisper of my own breath. I glance at Marcus, who gives me a quick nod. Then I focus on the barrier again. The first group of prospective jurors files in, their footsteps tentative. They take seats on the right side near Dominic, their expressions anxious. Some glance at him directly, eyes wide, others stare resolutely ahead, as though determined not to show emotion. This is the moment of truth. In mere minutes, one by one, these strangers will stand, answer personal questions, and reveal the biases that could determine Dominic Sinclair's fate. Who here will see him as a charismatic misfit? Who will see only a predator cloaked in fame? Who will look past the headlines to the man standing before them? I shift in my seat, feeling the wood press against my back. My recorder hums quietly. The gavel's echo still lingers in my ears. I steady my pen. This is more than a story of crime and punishment. It is a story of perception, of power, of humanity's unspoken judgments. And I am here to capture every moment. The judge's voice breaks my focus. Let the record show that this is the first day of jury selection in the matter of the United States versus Dominic Sinclair. Counsel, but please proceed. As the attorneys rise to speak, I take my first full, deep breath. All eyes turn toward the counsel tables. My heart slows, but the tension remains, sharp and insistent. The story has begun. Marcus Bennett's breath caught in his throat as he trained his lens on the defendant's table. He adjusted the focus until Dominic Sinclair's sharp profile filled the viewfinder. Do you ever feel as though a single photograph could tell 1,000 unspoken stories as the camera's shutter clicked? Marcus felt he had captured a fragment of something far deeper than legal drama. From Marcus's vantage point, he observed the synchronized ballet of gestures at the defense table. Dominic sat flanked by his lead attorneys, Rachel Cortez to his right, her posture erect and confident, and Alexandra Shapiro to his left. Fingers interlaced on the table, scanning the courtroom with analytical calm. Between them, Dominic's stoic silhouette seemed untouchable, yet Marcus sensed hidden fissures in that composed exterior. He angled the camera downward to catch a subtle moment, Dominic lightly tapping the edge of his reading glasses. It was almost rhythmic, like a metronome marking the pace of his thoughts. Marcus lowered the camera, scribbling a note. Defendant's repetitive gestures possible sign of internal focus or rehearsed composure. He glanced at Victoria, who nodded and returned her gaze to the courtroom sketch artist. Together they moved as one, alternately recording and analyzing every nonverbal cue. At that moment, a hush fell over the right side of the room. A group of 12 prospective jurors shuffled in, taking seats in the front pews beside Dominic's table. Among them, one face stood out Samuel Sam Phillips, an elementary school teacher with warm brown eyes, partially hidden beneath thick-rimmed glasses. Sam glanced nervously at the barrier, then shifted his attention to Dominic, who offered only a slight nod in acknowledgement. Sam's shoulders straightened, and he took a deep breath, readying himself for the judge's questions. Marcus zoomed in on Sam's expression, anxiety mixed with resolve. He lowered the camera and leaned toward Victoria. "He looks like he's just stepped onto a stage," Marcus whispered. "And yet he volunteered for this role. Didn't he?" Victoria's pen flew across her notebook. Juror 07 Samuel Phillips, teacher. A calm exterior betrays underlying tension. Eye contact with defendant suggests initial engagement. At the same time, Helena von Roth jotted her own notes in the leather-bound journal. As the courtroom psychologist, she was less interested in capturing images and more intrigued by categorizing personalities. Her eyes flicked to Sam, tall, composed, perhaps an idealist in her temperament-based model, empathetic, attuned to human impact, potentially receptive to defense arguments about character and context. She tapped the page Sam Phillips, potential idealist, watch for empathy-driven responses. The judge's voice cut through the silent analysis. "Juror number 7, please stand." Sam rose, offering a small nod to the judge. The judge peered at his questionnaire. "You indicated here that you have experience teaching children who have experienced trauma? Can you expand on that?" Sam swallowed and spoke with measured calm. "Yes, Your Honor. I teach 3rd grade, and many of my students come from challenging backgrounds. I've worked with counselors to provide emotional support and safe spaces in the classroom." His voice was steady, but Marcus noticed a slight quiver at the edges of his tone. Empathy was clearly his strength. "Thank you," the judge said. "Now, given your background, do you believe you could set aside any personal feelings to remain impartial in this case?" Sam paused, brow furrowed. "I believe I can, Your Honor. I understand the distinction between caring deeply for individuals and evaluating evidence objectively." The judge nodded and turned to the defense table. As Sam returned to his seat, Dominic turned slightly to observe him. Marcus caught the exchange through his lens. Dominic's eyebrows lifting in curious appraisal, Sam offering a respectful yet questioning glance back. It felt like a silent conversation between two strangers sizing each other up. Marcus lowered the camera, struck by the gravity of that fleeting moment, a teacher and a celebrity, each curious about the other's role in this drama. Next to Sam, a young woman named Clara Monroe fidgeted with the strap of her handbag. Clara was a paralegal by profession, but today she wore jeans and a simple blouse, her legal expertise cloaked in casual attire. The judge called her forward to clarify a questionnaire response. Clara straightened, squared her shoulders, and explained. "I indicated that I once worked on a pro bono case defending a client accused of assault. I've seen how overwhelming the system can be, and I want to ensure everyone receives fair treatment." Marcus's pen raced Clara Monroe, paralegal, strong procedural bias, potentially defense-leaning. Helena tapped her journal. Clara, procedural purist, likely to focus on fairness of process rather than emotional appeals. Midway through questioning, Helena leaned toward Victoria and Marcus. "Watch the micro-expressions," she murmured. "They matter as much as the words." Victoria blinked and scanned her notes for any flicker of discomfort or doubt. Marcus lowered his camera, sensing that Helena's keen observations would soon prove pivotal. On the prosecution side, Alex Drake stood and addressed the judge. Alex's reputation for fierce cross-examinations preceded him. Today, he wore a charcoal suit and silk tie in a muted pattern. He moved to the center of the courtroom with confident strides. "Your Honor, I wish to address Juror number 9's remarks regarding social media comments about the defendant." Alex began. His voice was crisp, authoritative. "While it is normal to have encountered public discussion, I must ensure that no prospective juror has formed a fixed opinion." He turned to the jurors. If anyone here believes they cannot disregard external commentary and judge solely on courtroom evidence, please raise your hand. A tense silence followed. Then one man, arm raised, answered. The judge asked him to explain, and the man admitted that his connections on social media frequently streamed commentary about Dominic Sinclair. He nodded, shame mingling with relief. The judge excused him. Marcus watched as Dominic's expression flickered momentarily, an eyebrow lifted in subtle recognition, before settling back into his composed mask. As the jury pool thinned, the atmosphere grew taut. Each removal carried the weight of potential injustice or vindication. Marcus felt the enormity of his role to capture not just images, but the unspoken stakes behind them. He refocused on Dominic, whose calm exterior began to reveal slight fissures. At one point, Dominic's gaze drifted to the defense attorneys. Rachel Cortez leaned in to whisper something. Dominic's lips curved in almost a smile, a brief hint of reassurance passing between them. Marcus clicked the shutter. He knew that photograph would speak volumes later. He jotted. Defendant's rare smile of camaraderie with counsel, possible morale boost. Victoria leaned close and whispered, "That moment will be a highlight in my article. It humanizes him, for better or worse." Marcus nodded, feeling the chill of consequence settle over him. In that smile was the kernel of charm that had once built an empire, and perhaps the same charm that now stood trial. The judge finally called a recess. The hush lifted as jurors shuffled back behind the barrier. Dominic rose and walked with his attorneys toward the conference room at the back. Marcus snapped a few discreet photos of their silhouettes against the dim hallway light. The team disappeared through double doors, and suddenly the courtroom felt empty, hollow. Victoria exhaled and closed her notebook. "That was intense," she murmured. "We've seen the first wave. Now the real battle begins Monday, when opening statements open the floodgates." Helena gathered her journal and smiled faintly. "Yes," she said, "we've begun to understand our key players. Next week, we'll see how they perform under pressure." Marcus slung his camera over his shoulder. "I'll review these shots tonight," he said. "They'll tell us the story behind the story." As they filed out, Marcus paused at the door and looked back at the empty benches. In a few hours, the sun would set, but the echoes of this day would linger. He felt the weight of every moment captured, every gesture recorded, every heartbeat documented. And he knew that when the jury finally reached its verdict, those silent images would speak louder than words. Do you ever wonder what it means to be both witness and chronicler of history? Marcus stepped into the corridor, camera in hand, ready to capture whatever came next. A hush settled once more as the courtroom doors swung open. The second wave of prospective jurors entered, their footsteps echoing in the vaulted space. I watched Marcus Bennett raise his camera, ready to capture each new face. Do you ever feel that moment of anticipation, when a single breath seems to carry the weight of 1,000 possibilities one by one? They filed into the front pews. My eyes locked onto Elena Fisher, a former social worker whose gaze was steely and determined. She had been through traumas of her own client's abuse, neglect, hopelessness, and yet here she was, ready to assess another life's worth. The judge called her name. Elena rose, straightening her blouse, and offered a calm nod. "Ms. Fisher, you indicated in your questionnaire that you have experience working with victims of sexual violence." The judge said, "Given the nature of this case, could that experience affect your ability to remain impartial?" Elena inhaled deeply. "Your Honor, my training was to listen without judgment and to focus on facts and evidence. While I empathize with victims, I understand my duty is to evaluate testimony objectively." Her voice was unwavering. I jotted Elena Fisher, social worker, empathy balanced by professional discipline. Behind Elena, Dominic Sinclair's hand drifted to his chin. Through Marcus's lens, I saw the briefest furrow in Dominic's brow as he considered her answer. Was he calculating an advantage or simply acknowledging a potential ally on the jury? He replaced a reading glass and returned his gaze forward. The mask of composure slipped back into place. The judge turned to the prosecutor's table. Alex Drake stood and nodded respectfully. His eyes narrowed as he considered Elena. Ms. Fisher, could you put aside any personal feelings if the evidence contradicts your prior beliefs? Elena paused, then replied, Yes, I can set aside personal reactions to focus solely on courtroom evidence. The judge thanked her, and she returned to her seat without another glance. Next, the judge called forward Daniel Reynolds, a retired firefighter whose broad shoulders spoke of years of carrying literal and figurative weights. Marcus zoomed in as Daniel cleared his throat. Mr. Reynolds, you wrote that you have strong respect for authority figures. Given that many witnesses in this case are law enforcement officers, could that deference affect your judgment? Daniel's face tightened. I respect the badge, he said slowly. But I also understand that no one is infallible. I will evaluate each witness's credibility based on what I see and hear, not their uniform. Victoria Hartman scribbled Daniel Reynolds, authority respecting, but self-aware potential check. Marcus caught a flicker of doubt in Daniel's eyes as he answered, as though Daniel was surprised by his own determination. Helena watched intently, noting Reynolds. Leader type. May sway other jurors, but open to evidence. A subtle tension rippled through the room as the judge's gaze swept the pews. Behind me, the press murmured. Each juror's answer tightened the web of alliances and biases being woven in real time. Suddenly, a commotion arose near the back. A man in a rumpled suit was escorted in juror number 15, though his name was Matthew Abrams. His appearance clashed with the muted formality around him, unshaven, tie askew, eyes bloodshot. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Abrams, is there any change you wish to make to your questionnaire? The judge asked. Matthew's voice trembled. Yes, Your Honor. I did not disclose that I served time for possession several years ago. It was a mistake of youth. A collective gasp rose from the press section. Dominic's expression flickered with alert interest. Through my notepad, I wrote Matthew Abrams, concealed criminal history, potential towards prosecution bias. Helena swiftly underlined concealed bias in her journal. Mr. Abrams, the judge said, failure to disclose that information compromises your ability to serve impartially. You are excused for cause. Matthew lowered his head as bailiffs guided him out. Marcus lowered his camera and exhaled slowly, the blinds closing on a potential threat. The room seemed to exhale too, the tension easing slightly. A lull followed as the judge surveyed the remaining jurors. Dominic crossed his arms, his gaze flicking toward the jury box. He leaned in to whisper something to Rachel Cortez. She nodded gravely. Marcus and I exchanged looks. Every whispered word carried weight. Then the doors swung open once more. The final group of jurors entered six faces, six fates. Among them was Sophia Keller, a medical resident whose white coat had been swapped for a navy blazer. She wore an expression of calm professionalism. The judge called her forward. Dr. Keller, he began. You indicated you have experience in trauma cases in the emergency room? Given the emotionally charged nature of this trial, could that background influence you? Sophia's tone was steady. Your Honor, in the ER, I learned to compartmentalize emotion and prioritize facts. I believe I can apply that skill here. Marcus captured her poised reply. I wrote, Sophia Keller, trauma-trained, clinical objectivity. Helena nodded slightly. Keller, analytical thinker, receptive to expert testimony. One by one, the jurors filed back out, their answers reducing the pool to 25. The judge paused, then turned to the attorneys. We will reconvene tomorrow at 9 for final questioning and peremptory challenges, he announced. The gavel struck once. A collective exhale swept the room as the jurors departed through the side doors. Dominic rose, shoulders straight, and followed his counsel out the same doors. Marcus snapped a final photograph of Dominic's back, retreating into the corridor light. I jotted defendant's departure, measured confidence remains. As the courtroom emptied, Helena gathered her notes. We've seen empathy, authority deference, potential biases, and concealments, she said softly. Tomorrow, the peremptory strikes will shape the final panel. That is when strategy truly takes over. Victoria closed her notebook. That was a roller coaster, she said. Every answer revealed a piece of the puzzle. Now the real puzzle solving begins. I packed my recorder away and paused in the aisle, looking back at the empty pews. Can you imagine sitting here, knowing you might decide another person's fate? That weight must be unimaginable. Outside, the bright light of late afternoon streamed through the courthouse windows. The storm of jury selection had passed for the day, but the real drama lay ahead. As Marcus and I stepped into the corridor, our minds buzzed with the raw material we had gathered: body language, hidden biases, fleeting expressions. Tomorrow, the jury would be finalized. And with that, Dominic Sinclair's fate would begin to crystallize. We walked away under that blazing light, carrying the burden of what we had witnessed and prepared for the next chapter, when decisions, rather than words, would speak the loudest. Do you feel the weight of those final choices? That is the question that will follow us into tomorrow's courtroom. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, as though the weather itself demanded solemnity. I stood beneath the courthouse portico, umbrella in hand, watching Dominic Sinclair's black sedan pull up to the curb. Do you ever notice how a single person can create a ripple of commotion without uttering a word? As the driver opened the rear door, a dozen cameras lifted in unison, capturing his every movement. Dominic stepped onto the slick pavement and paused, letting the crowd's flashbulbs reflect off his polished shoes. He offered no comment, only a brief nod toward the press before entering the building. Rachel Cortez and Alexandra Shapiro flanked him, providing an invisible shield of calm competence. I lowered my notebook, heart pounding. Today was opening statements. Inside. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Reporters jockeyed for position. Cameramen adjusted tripods. The remaining 25 prospective jurors settled into the gallery seats. Helena von Roth moved quietly between defense counsel and the judge's clerk, finalizing the strike list. I watched her methodical tally 5 strikes remaining for each side. Every decision here would resonate for the entire trial. At precisely 9 o'clock, the bailiff's voice rang out. All rise. The United States District Court is now in session. Judge Subramaniam entered to the steady thud of boots on hardwood. He took his seat, and the room fell silent as if the walls themselves exhaled. The judge spoke, his tone measured. We will now finalize jury selection. Counsel, please proceed with peremptory challenges. Alex Drake, the lead prosecutor, rose first. His dark suit contrasted sharply with his crisp white shirt. He scanned the remaining pool, his eyes lingering on each face. Then, one by one, he exercised his strikes. A banker, a college student, a real estate agent, all dismissed with a succinct strike and a curt gesture. Each removal elicited a barely audible murmur from the prospective jurors as they filed out. Victoria Hartman scribbled furiously. Prosecution final strikes eliminating potential defense sympathizers. Banker, student, agent. Marcus clicked his pen in rhythm, capturing the procedural dance. Elena Fisher, Daniel Reynolds, Sam Phillips, Clara Monroe, Sophia Keller. 12 remained. They took seats in the jury box, heads bowed in concentration. Next, Rachel Cortez rose to execute the defense's strikes. She moved with deliberate grace, choosing 3: an engineer, a banker's assistant, and a marketing executive, each removed for perceived prosecutorial bias. Alexandra Shapiro followed with 2 more, citing nonverbal cues of distrust. At last, only 12 jurors and 6 alternates remained. The jury was seated. The judge called them forward jurors. Please stand and raise your right hand. They obeyed in unison. The clerk administered the oath. As each juror repeated after him, I swear to render a true verdict. I felt the courtroom's gravity deepen. 12 individuals, now entrusted with deciding a man's fate. Judge Subramaniam addressed the panel. Ladies and gentlemen, you are now sworn. You must keep an open mind until all evidence and arguments have been presented. Do not discuss the case with anyone until deliberations begin. The jurors nodded, eyes serious. Then the judge turned toward the attorneys. Opening statements will begin with the prosecution, he said. Alex Drake stood, his shoulders squared. He cleared his throat, adjusting his silk tie. I braced for the first salvo. He spoke with controlled passion, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. You will hear evidence of a man whose fame and fortune permitted him to believe he was above the law. Dominic Sinclair, once known for his philanthropic efforts and global influence, stands accused of brutal crimes against our most vulnerable citizens. His voice echoed against the chamber's stone walls. Images appeared on the projection screen behind him, a black and white photograph of a young woman's hand, bruised and trembling, a man's silhouette looming in a dim hallway. My chest tightened. The audience shifted. Some lowered their heads. Do you remember the first time you saw a photograph that pierced your soul? This was that moment, Alex continued. You will hear testimony from witnesses who escaped terror, from law enforcement officers who risked everything to bring these allegations to light, and from experts who will explain how coercion and manipulation trap victims in cycles of fear. He paced slowly, each step deliberate. At the end of this trial, you will see that Dominic Sinclair's wealth and charisma cannot shield him from accountability. He paused, letting the words linger. Then he concluded, We ask you to remember that justice does not favor the powerful. It favors the truth. With a final nod, he returned to the prosecution table. A hush followed a collective intake of breath. Marcus tapped my shoulder. Powerful, he whispered. He laid down the challenge right away. I nodded, outlining the opening statement's thesis. Prosecution positioned Sinclair as predator cloaked in influence. Now it was the defense's turn. Rachel Cortez rose, her heels clicking softly on the wooden floor. She approached the jury with calm authority. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just seen the prosecution's dramatic images, she began. You will hear emotional testimony. But before you judge, we ask you to consider context. Her voice was warm, measured, as though she spoke in a living room rather than a courtroom. Behind her, a photograph appeared of a building's grand foyer, one of Sinclair's charity gala venues. She gestured gently. This man built a foundation to feed the hungry, to fund scientific research, to empower communities. Yes, he is a public figure, but public figures are not monsters until proven guilty. She paused, gazing directly at the jurors. We ask for your impartiality. We ask you to weigh every piece of evidence, to listen without prejudice. Her words felt like a balm after the prosecutor's strike. The jurors' faces softened, as though they, too, needed a moment to breathe. Rachel continued the victim's stories. Matter. So do Mr. Sinclair's rights. The presumption of innocence is the cornerstone of our justice system. You must not let fame or media coverage influence your verdict. You must judge this case on facts, not headlines. Not, as she spoke. Marcus photographed her every gesture, the open palms, the empathetic tilt of her head, the confident steadiness of her stance. I scribbled defense frames, Sinclair as human, philanthropic, deserving fair assessment, emphasis on presumption of innocence. When Rachel concluded, the courtroom remained silent for a heartbeat longer than before. Then Alexandra Shapiro added a brief amplification. You will hear testimony that seems graphic and unsettling. That is part of the process. But remember, not every accusation is equal. Context, corroboration, and credibility are what you must evaluate. The defense sat. Dominic Sinclair leaned back in his chair, shoulders relaxing for the first time. He glanced at his attorneys and offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. Marcus captured that moment the defendant's first visible reaction. Judge Subramaniam then spoke. Members of the jury, you have heard both sides' previews of their cases. You will now hear evidence. Witnesses will testify, and you must keep an open mind. Court is adjourned until tomorrow at 9. The gavel fell. The spectators rose and filed into the hall. I stood, heart still racing from the rhetorical clash. Outside the courtroom, reporters huddled in clusters. Flashbulbs popped as Dominic reemerged, composed behind his defense team. Marcus murmured, "That smile." I think he heard hope there. I nodded, knowing that smiles in court could carry more weight than any argument. As we made our way down the corridor, Helena joined us. "Tomorrow, the witness testimony begins," she said. "Expect the emotional moments, the medical experts, maybe even character witnesses. The battle lines are drawn." Victoria closed her notebook. "We captured the first volley," she said. "Now we prepare for the real confrontation." I slipped my recorder into my bag, mind spinning with the opening statement's impact. In that moment, I realized that stories of guilt and innocence always hinge on more than evidence. They hinge on narrative, on the human need to believe in justice. And tomorrow, as witnesses step forward, each word spoken will carry the power to shape the jurors and the world's understanding of Dominic Sinclair. Do you feel the anticipation? Tomorrow, the truth begins to reveal itself. The courtroom buzzed with subdued tension as the clerk called the first witness, Emily Jacobs, a young woman in her mid-20s. Emily rose with measured steps, her hands clasped tightly at her waist. Her eyes flicked nervously toward the jury box, and I wondered if any of them could fully comprehend the courage it took to speak here today. Do you remember a moment when fear and resolve collided within you as Emily settled into the witness chair? Her voice trembled at first, then found firmness. The prosecutor, Alex Drake, approached with calm authority. He held a thin binder of documents and photographs. "State your full name." "Please," he said. "Emily Marie Jacobs," she replied, her soft voice carrying into every corner of the room. "Ms. Jacobs, how do you know Dominic Sinclair?" Alex asked, sliding a photograph across the table. The image showed Emily standing beside Dominic at a charity gala, both smiling under sparkling lights. Emily's eyes welled. "He hired me as an intern at Sinclair Global Foundation. I worked on event planning and logistics. Can you describe your relationship over the next 6 months?" Alex continued. Emily swallowed. "At first, Mr. Sinclair was generous. He asked for my ideas, listened to my suggestions, but after the first few events, his behavior changed. He began to request private meetings in dimly lit rooms. He'd compliment my appearance, then insist I stay late alone with him." She paused, glancing toward the jury. I felt trapped. I thought I could manage. I thought I could say no, but I was afraid of losing my job. A low murmur rippled through the gallery. I glanced at the jurors, some exchanged uneasy glances. Others leaned forward, intent. Through Marcus's lens, I captured the moment Emily's chin trembled. He lowered his camera and made a quick note. "Witness displays signs of distress under direct questioning." Alex unfolded a series of black and white stills from security footage. One image depicted Emily entering a private office corridor, looking over her shoulder. The next showed Dominic closing the door behind her. A third showed Emily's expression of shock as the door swung shut. "Ms. Jacobs, is this your voice?" Alex asked, pressing a small audio recorder button. Emily listened to her own words, recorded months earlier. "Please let me go. This is not right." She nodded, voice breaking. "Yes, that is me. Do you recognize the man's voice on this recording?" Emily's gaze shifted to Dominic. He remained motionless, arms folded. After a long moment, she whispered, "Yes, that is Mr. Sinclair." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Subramaniam tapped his gavel lightly, restoring order. "Ladies and gentlemen, you will disregard any emotional reaction. You must consider this evidence as presented." Alex closed the folder and nodded to the clerk. "No further questions." A sudden hush fell as the defense table stirred. Rachel Cortez rose with composed confidence. "Ms. Jacobs, she began gently. You said you feared losing your job. Did anyone explicitly threaten you? Emily blinked, visibly gathering strength. Not with words, but when I tried to leave the foundation. My supervisor warned me that I would be blacklisted in the industry. Dominic is powerful. I was terrified. Rachel's voice softened. So what you perceived was intimidation by reputation. You saw his influence and felt endangered. She paused. Is that correct? Emily nodded, tears glinting on her cheeks. Yes, Ms. Jacobs. Did Mr. Sinclair ever physically coerce you? Rachel asked. Emily shook her head. No, he used his status and charm. I felt pressured, but he never touched me. With that answer, Rachel sat. Having established that power imbalance was psychological rather than physical, I noted defense reframes coercion as emotional pressure, not physical assault. Judge Subramaniam excused Emily for the jury's sequestration. She left with quick steps, head bowed. The jury watched, pens poised. The first witness had set the trial's emotional bar high. Next, Alex Drake called Detective Luis Ramirez from the Metropolitan Sex Crimes Unit. A veteran investigator. Ramirez wore a crisp suit and a solemn expression. He approached the stand, placed the binders on the lectern, and raised his right hand. I solemnly swear to tell the truth, he intoned. Alex began Detective Ramirez. Please outline the Foundation's investigation into Ms. Jacobs' allegations. Ramirez opened a folder. On June 12th, 2024, Ms. Jacobs reported coercive conduct by Dominic Sinclair. I obtained security footage from the Foundation's building. The images shown earlier are part of that footage. I also collected digital logs of Mr. Sinclair's communications soliciting private meetings with Ms. Jacobs. He held up a printed email. This message dated May 23rd reads, I value your insight greatly. Please meet me in my office tonight. I trust you. He handed the document to Alex, who passed it to the jury. How did you verify the authenticity of this email? Alex asked. Through digital forensics. The email header traces to Mr. Sinclair's verified account. Metadata confirms the timestamp and source. Ramirez spoke with technical precision, yet his eyes betrayed a slight impatience, perhaps frustration, at having to prove what seemed obvious. Alex nodded. Thank you. Detective? He turned to the defense table and asked, No further questions from me. Your Honor. Rachel Cortez stood again, tilting a head in respect. Detective, you say the email came from Mr. Sinclair's account. Is it possible someone else accessed his account without his knowledge? Ramirez considered. It is theoretically possible, but highly unlikely. No evidence suggests unauthorized access. All logs indicate the login originated from Mr. Sinclair's personal device. Rachel pressed on. Could a staff member have impersonated him to avoid professional consequences? She went on, carefully exploring alternative explanations. Ramirez remained unwavering. No credible evidence supports that claim. Having clarified the forensic chain, Rachel sat. I noted defense attempts to introduce reasonable doubt in account authenticity. Witness confirms digital integrity. After Ramirez's testimony, Alex called a clinical psychologist, Dr. Miriam Langston, to explain the psychological effects of coercion. Dr. Langston took the stand and spoke in measured tones about power dynamics, emotional manipulation, and the reasons victims may feel unable to resist. She projected slides showing brain scans and stress hormone charts, illustrating how fear and admiration can overlap. The jurors scribbled detailed notes. I captured snapshots of their expressions. Eyebrows furrowed, pens paused midair. Stories backed by science carried weight. As Dr. Langston described victims' stress responses, the jurors leaned forward, absorbing every word. Once Dr. Langston concluded, defense experts were called to offer alternative perspectives. Professor Anthony Reed, a specialist in organizational behavior, testified that hierarchical structures can create perceived pressure even without malicious intent. His academic tone and citations of peer-reviewed studies provided a stark contrast to the emotional testimony. The morning session ended with an exchange that marked a clear battle line. Alex Drake asked, "Professor Reed, would you agree that intent matters less than effect?" If Ms. Jacobs felt terrorized, does that not constitute harm? Reed paused, choosing words carefully. Effect is significant. However, legal standards require demonstrable intent to coerce. One's perception alone cannot establish criminal intent without corroborating evidence. At that, Rachel nodded appreciatively. I noted expert clash emotional effect versus legal intent. Judge Subramaniam called a recess. Jurors filed out slowly, still deep in thought. Dominic Sinclair stood to depart, his posture relaxed, as though fortified by the morning's proceedings. He offered a small, confident smile to his attorneys, then slipped away through the side door. As the courtroom emptied, Marcus exhaled and closed his camera. Helena von Roth gathered her notes, her expression unreadable. Victoria Hartman shut her notebook with satisfaction. We had witnessed the first stark contrast a young woman's courage pitted against an empire's defense, forensic certainty against psychological nuance. Outside, the drizzle had ceased, leaving the streets slick and reflective. I paused under the courthouse awning and looked back. The trial's arc had shifted. No longer was it merely a procedural contest. Now it was a personal crucible, where every testimony would be weighed not only for facts, but for emotional resonance. Do you feel the weight of those moments when stories collide with science? And truth hides between perception and proof. That is the terrain we will traverse tomorrow, as more witnesses step forward and more secrets come to light. The courtroom doors opened once more, admitting an air of solemn determination. As the jurors returned to their seats, I felt the weight of today's testimony press against my chest. Each witness had already carved a new layer into this case, yet nothing compared to the arrival of Cassandra Novak. The day's final witness and perhaps its most critical. Do you ever sense that one person's story can shift the entire trajectory of an event? Today, that story belonged to Cassandra. Cassandra, mid-30s and dressed in a simple gray dress, approached the stand with measured confidence. She carried herself like someone who had spent years preparing for a moment just like this. Once seated, she clasped her hands and drew a slow breath. The judge nodded to Alex Drake, who stepped forward with a respectful inclination of the head. Ms. Novak, would you please state your role at the Sinclair Global Foundation? Alex asked. Voice calm but firm. I served as head of human resources for 2 years, she replied, her voice steady. I oversaw personnel matters, workplace policies, and employee welfare. During that time, did you witness any reports or complaints regarding Dominic Sinclair's conduct? Alex continued, producing a small stack of documents. He slid one toward Cassandra. It bore an official letterhead and an anonymous complaint summary. Cassandra's eyes flicked to the paper, then leveled on Alex. Yes. In August of last year, I received a confidential report alleging unwanted advances by Mr. Sinclair toward a junior employee. She paused, gripping the edge of the stand. My office conducted an internal inquiry, interviewing witnesses and reviewing electronic communication. The findings indicated a pattern of coercive behavior. A hush fell. I captured the moment through my field notes. HR head confirms systemic complaints. Internal inquiry corroborates coercion pattern. The jurors leaned forward, pens poised. Alex pressed on Ms. Novak. Why was this matter not escalated to law enforcement at that time? Cassandra's gaze dropped briefly, then returned with resolve. The complainant feared retaliation. The Foundation's policy required mediation rather than immediate external reporting. I advocated for a referral to the appropriate authorities, but was overruled by senior management concerned about reputational risk. The courtroom shivered at her admission. Senior management's decision not to report to authorities now formed a crucial context, a powerful individual shielding himself through corporate protocol. I noted corporate hierarchy prioritized reputation over justice key element in pattern of cover-up. Rachel Cortez rose to begin cross-examination. Her tone was respectful but probing. Ms. Novak, you describe internal policies requiring mediation. Were those policies clearly communicated to all staff? Cassandra nodded. Yes, employees received training on dispute resolution. However, few felt comfortable invoking those procedures when the accused was the Foundation's primary benefactor. Did you witness any attempts by Mr. Sinclair to influence those policies? Rachel asked quietly. Cassandra took a breath. He once suggested in a board meeting that our conflict resolution process be more discreet for high-level concerns. I understood that to mean that I should handle his matters in-house rather than seek external counsel. Rachel's next question cut to the heart of the matter. Do you believe that discretion policy effectively shielded Mr. Sinclair from accountability? Cassandra's lips pressed together. I do. She paused, her eyes reflecting a mixture of sorrow and determination. I believe it was designed to protect those with power. As Cassandra returned to her seat, I felt the courtroom's atmosphere shift. The jury's collective gaze lingered on the empty stand where she had sat. Through Marcus's lens, I saw juror Clara Monroe close her eyes for a moment, as if absorbing the full weight of Cassandra's words. Judge Subramaniam then called for the next witness. Dr. Elena Foster, a leading expert in workplace ethics. Dr. Foster explained the dynamics of power imbalances in corporate environments and how institutional safeguards can fail victims without proper enforcement. Her testimony was clinical, yet harrowing statistics on unreported incidents, charts illustrating delays in reporting, and studies on fear of retaliation. Sophia Keller, the medical juror, furrowed her brow at the stress hormone charts. Daniel Reynolds, the retired firefighter, leaned forward, perhaps drawing parallels to his own experiences of institutional loyalty. Even Dominic sat forward, fingers steepled, absorbing the expert's words with an almost analytical fascination. By mid-afternoon, the final witnesses had testified. The prosecution had built a narrative of systemic pressure, emotional coercion, and institutional failure. The defense countered with legal nuance policies misapplied, questions of intent, and the absence of physical force. Each side had sharpened their arguments on the whetstone of evidence and emotion. As the judge declared a recess, I gathered my notes and reflected on what I had seen. A pattern of power protecting power. A culture of silence preserved by corporate loyalty, and individual acts of courage that pierced the facade. It struck me that truth often emerges only when personal bravery collides with collective interests. Stepping into the corridor's dim light, I leaned against the marble wall, feeling the day's gravity in my bones. This was more than a legal battle, it was a moral reckoning. I closed my eyes for a moment, imagining myself in the jurors' seats. Could I set aside the irresistible influence of wealth and status? Could I weigh policies against personal testimonies with unwavering impartiality? These questions settled within me, guiding the story's next chapter. Personal reflection and invitation. Covering this trial has reminded me that real human lives lie at the heart of every headline. We must ask ourselves, what price do we place on truth? And how far are we willing to go to ensure that power is held to account? Each piece of evidence, each testimony, reveals a facet of our collective conscience. And as viewers, our role is not just to watch, but to reflect on fairness, on empathy, and on our own responsibility to seek justice. If you found this episode illuminating, I invite you to join the conversation. Share your thoughts in the comments. How would you approach these complex moral dilemmas? And if you value in-depth, human-centered analysis, please subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update as we follow each twist and turn of this landmark trial. Together, let us keep the conversation alive and the pursuit of truth unwavering. Thank you for watching. See you in the next chapter.